Oh my goodness, oh my goodness, oh my goodness, family surprise.
There's competition as Suzuka Konpena. Even though it's just a Pirelli test to test tires for the next season, it's raining and we're simply seeing something very normal. It's about testing everything far from pure performance, but rather testing the tire's structural limits.
That's being done right now in Suzuka, but we have times that we don't need to take into account. But do we want Formula One or don't we? Espa es siguiente en Astanda.
Following the good news that you have in the last video published, where Franco Colapinto's exhibition in Buenos Aires on the 26th of this month is confirmed, it's April 1st today, we also have the same Formula 1 competition even if it's just with tests, and we have something to tell you.
Because yes, because Red Bull and Racing Bulls are actually pulling out no more and no less than a performance for the test and absolutely everything else you could possibly want, but some little things have definitely happened. You don't believe it? Take a look at this. Is none other than Arvid Lindblad's accident. This is something that obviously is quite normal during these testing sessions. Arvid Lindblad, of course, has limited experience and they're running mule cars with new tire compounds. So if it's raining, they're certainly making the most of the conditions, but they are testing wet weather tires and that's resulted in Lindblad's accident.
Now I'll show you some images of the accident that I have here, which I've managed to retrieve from social media. But besides the entire test day yesterday and today where Lindblad's accident happened, I'll tell you now how this is going and exactly which teams and drivers are involved. We are also very much keeping an eye on Verstappen because Verstappen is impatient. He's impatient because he already turned down Mercedes at the time, and this could lead to him eventually regretting it. Do you also know who has spoken? Laurent Mekies. Yes, the Red Bull boss, Verstappen's team principal, who doesn't know how to keep him, and now I'll tell you what he said.
He says that Verstappen would be happy once again in Formula 1.
Yes, absolutely, Laurent. Now, we're going to tell you why. Let's take a look because I truly believe that Verstappen and the Red Bull team are living in parallel universes.
And on the other hand, we'll begin this video before we get to all the Pirelli testing with some news that's very important for the future of Formula 1 because Behrman's accident is a top priority. Listen closely at the meeting of the teams and the FIA. So, this is what Andrea Stella says. It seems things are moving forward well. The path is clearing to make some changes to these regulations to improve safety, to make it perfect for my Formula 1 drivers. Well then, we're moving on to the Pirelli test because yes, there's a lot to discuss. Why? Because there are little things to analyze even though they are obviously just tests clearly. And we shouldn't take the times into consideration. Besides, it's on a wet track, but we are going to take some things that could help. Who knows, Verstappen to have something better in the upcoming Grand Prix.
Welcome, Formula Minix dito YouTube's Corner Bar View. We've got Pirelli test, Verstappen news, and absolutely everything, guys. Look, first of all, I want to tell you something. Red Bull, this test can't really be used for performance because obviously they're running on 2027 tires, especially if they're wet and such. But I'll tell you something, they will be able to adjust some things like suspension maps, validate the car's sensitivity to casing changes, well, different things that Red Bull obviously will try to take advantage of. Because right now, do you know something? They're 1 second off the pace. And obviously, these tests are normal, and now Red Bull is doing them, and Mercedes did them before, and then Alpine will do them. And this is the crucial moment. Oh, who knows if Red Bull and Racing Bull, who are also present, can seize it. Because you know that Racing Bull is a much smaller team and they should really capitalize on all these opportunities to manage aspects like, for example, rear tire temperature control and so on in wet races. This could give you a podium in this race if it rains during any race. Well, now we're going to see all the details of the Pirelli test, the times, Lindblad's accident. I have to show you some images. But first, the accident involving Behrman, not Lindblad and Colapinto, will be a priority at the meeting of the FIA and Formula 1 teams. This is what Andrea Stella says, who is this person you see right here, the big boss of McLaren. And, the big boss with the obvious permission of Zak Brown. So, what does he say? And this is a case that must be studied with an analytical approach. Stella continues.
I don't believe a simple solution exists, but we possess the necessary information, the required skills, and the engineers capable of finding it. And I truly believe, as Stella concluded her initial paragraph, I believe that this absolutely must be the very first point on the agenda for the discussions that take place during the break involving the FIA, the teams, and Formula One. It's vital to grasp the changes made will consider not just the FIA, because many people say, oh, it's the FIA, you know, but all this is in agreement with the teams and the drivers. He says it in following Ferrari, we saw the right point to attack was between Spoon and the chicane. You all know that between Spoon and the chicane, the very spot just before it is where Colapinto and Berman. He says, using the boost on that stretch, you reach 130R at 340 kilometers per hour, a speed that forces you to lift your foot off the accelerator due to very limited grip, so it's not just an energy requirement. During the race, we observed that he wasn't able to complete the overtake before the 130R corner. He then pushed again to attempt an attack at the chicane, resulting in additional battery consumption. Obviously, every team possesses its own unique maps, and this is what partly accounted for the significant difference, the gap between Colapinto and Berman, you know? He says, my apologies. I believe this aspect can also be corrected through an intervention in the regulations, Stella said. For example, engineers could be given the option to autonomously select the areas of the circuit where they would use the combustion engine without necessarily having to rely on the electric one, okay? So, what would this accomplish? This would mean that if, for instance, in the recharging areas, you wouldn't have to significantly reduce your speed, would you? These days, if a driver accelerates again after a lift-off phase, they know they'll be compelled to use energy. So I think it would be much better to have more flexibility in battery management. They mentioned this, for example, well, before the 130R corner, which is flat out, and then you re-inject power to achieve the overtake before the chicane, right? He says, most likely we wouldn't see those counter overtakes only due to the recharge, as happened in the race with Lewis and Lando, right? Well, solutions are being put forward, and I wanted to share with you Andrea Stella's words, which are truly significant and that quite obviously begin to clearly mark the path that the FIA, Formula One, the FIA, and everyone involved must follow and act upon. We have made this very clear. Pirelli test, okay? We're going to the Pirelli test. There are only two teams, Red Bull and Racing Bull, and they're on a wet track, which is certainly intense and interesting, isn't it? Well, look, they tell you clearly it's drenched by torrential rain, okay? Be careful because this could be something key to getting good data from Pirelli, but you have to be careful. The Italian brand, supplier of tires for Formula One of the Grand Circus, has been able to test the wet compounds, that is the intermediates and the full wets, okay? The first day of testing took place yesterday, on Tuesday. Today is Wednesday, as you already know. It featured two teams from the same family, Red Bull and Racing Bulls, right? Hadjar and Liam Lawson were behind the wheel, respectively. Okay, this all happened yesterday. These compounds they had different designs than those approved for the 2026 season. Why? Because Pirelli's intention is to continue developing the super intermediate, hoping to introduce it perhaps in 2027. That's why I told you we can't consider lap times or anything, no? Red Bull and Racing Bull won't be able to take much advantage of it either, but I hope they can get some small things out of it so Verstappen isn't a second off the pace, right? It says Hadjar completed 69 laps, a total of 401, while Lawson did 65 laps, 377 kilometers. Hadjar Tartikta at the best time yesterday in about 145, 510 using intermediate tires. So in the afternoon session, Lawson also set his best time on the same tire, but the 148. Right? That's 3 seconds slower, which you don't need to consider. All right. So today is Wednesday, right? Red Bull and Racing Bull have been working at Suzuka to continue their tire testing. They've continued to use the wet weather tires, intermediates, and such. It's reported that a track excursion is worth highlighting. Well, more than a track excursion, it's an accident involving Arvid Lindblad, who today replaced Lawson behind the wheel of the Racing Bulls, the VCAR BV03, okay? So, the young talent, the British driver, crashed at Degner to turn 9, okay? It's turn 9 of the Suzuka circuit. It says damaging the nose of his single-seater, which still sports a special livery, all right? It says the British-Swedish driver has completed 299 kilometers, as his team has reported. And this is the official statement before I show you the photos I found of Lindblad. It says,
This included 1 stint on dry weather tires and 3 on intermediate tires, during which Lindblad crashed into the trackside barriers due to aquaplaning when he encountered standing water on the circuit. He then continued testing with 4 runs on extreme wet weather tires. Okay? So kudos to the Red Bull and Racing Bull teams, because I'm going to show you exactly how the car ended up and the fact that it was able to continue with the test. If nothing else, that's certainly good news, isn't it? Let's see, I have it right here. Look, here's an example. This is Lindblad as Suzuka. All right, you all know that obviously he has no experience in the rain at all, and torrential rain is currently falling. And here's this account, Formula Aerodynamics. I'm not entirely sure what it is, but every now and then they share things, and it says Lindblad crashed during the Pirelli test. All right? And here you can clearly see Lindblad's nose cone completely destroyed. This is Lindblad as well. You can see him right there on your screen. Just a moment, I'll make it a little bit bigger for you, okay? Here you can see Lindblad, how he's veering off to the other side. The front end a little bit wrecked. The footage is from Yo-Yo Subon or 6, right? Someone who got lucky and is perfectly positioned there in Suzuka. And here is the other image I also wanted to show you of Arvid Lindblad looking at the car. You can clearly see the track is extremely wet, and he experienced a moment of aquaplaning, which led him to go off the track. I believe I have something more to show you. Yes, it's a slightly closer shot of the image, so you can see how the Racing Bulls ended up. What a tremendous impact he sustained. And this really highlights the incredible safety of today's Formula 1 cars, doesn't it? Undoubtedly, it's truly excellent. And here you can clearly see how the front end is completely wrecked. Okay? You can also see the tires here, which are the experimental ones for 2027. And we take this opportunity to examine them because this photo allows us to see exactly what they look like. In theory, I believe these. I'm not sure if they are the super intermediates or what specific type of tires they are. But anyway, there we have one of the key aspects of the tests right there in high definition and quite large. And Arvid Lindblad's accident, who is obviously fine and is already getting his first experiences in the rain to learn, which is necessary, of course. Well, folks, what a great Pirelli test they've had here, still ongoing today, and we don't know the times yet. As soon as the day ends, I'll let you know. And then, yeah, on the other hand, we have the whole commotion with Verstappen, right? Because Verstappen is going from having rejected Mercedes to the situation he's facing now, which he's clearly not pleased with. For those who haven't heard, Verstappen's bombshell declaration is as follows. I'm thinking about everything that's happening in this paddock. I was like, wow. As a CEO, we race in so many races and I wonder if it's truly worth it, says Verstappen. Or if I'd rather be at home with my family and see my friends. I can easily accept being in 7th or 8th position. That is where I am right now, but you don't fully enjoy what you do and I don't think that's natural for a racing driver. I want to be here to have a lot of fun, spend some good times, and really enjoy my life. That is what Verstappen kept on saying. But for the moment, in these statements to the BBC, it is not like that, though, of course, he did appreciate certain aspects of it. I really like working with the team. It is truly like a second family to me, says Max. But when I sit down in the car, unfortunately, it is not the most pleasant experience for me. I'm trying, I keep telling myself every single day, I try to enjoy what I have, but it's very difficult, says the Dutchman. Verstappen seems to need some motivation because this is leading to a lot of speculation. And obviously, the first one is that he's regretting what happened with Mercedes, right? Because it is a lost opportunity, as Motorsport rightly says here, perhaps forever. We'll just have to wait and see because everyone in the world wants Verstappen, but you can't deny that Antonelli is doing reasonably well, even though he has little to compare with Verstappen, I believe. We're talking about Mercedes, the team with whom the Dutchman held extensive discussions. The salary offer was clearly on the table for Max Verstappen. The opportunity to change teams was completely in his hands, but in the end, his strong desire to remain with Red Bull ultimately prevailed. And this decision could have been a decision that Verstappen might regret for a very long time because from the perspective of having chosen the Mercedes option, even though it would have been very premature, even though Red Bull, when it comes to premature moves, has already done many things like putting Tsunoda in last year instead of Lawson in race number 3, was it? Or was it 2 in Japan? Well, what's clear is with the benefit of hindsight, it's much easier to see everything, but Verstappen would have given a tremendous boost to his aspirations na being able to fight against Russell and not have to be suffering now because they are suffering a second, sometimes even more, of the race lead. Though, yeah, that's a lot, isn't it? No? He says, it's important to remember that Verstappen was fighting for the title until the very last race of last year. And you should know that the bad news for Max is that Mercedes' door, which he chose not to cross, might now remain closed for a very long time. So we'll see.
It seems Andrea Kimi Antonelli was making a strong impression at Mercedes, although surely Toto Wolff will have something else to consider because having Verstappen there, disillusioned with his team, and being able to have him on your team is something everyone wants to see, right? It says, a profile like Verstappen's no longer represents a necessity. In fact, the team has closed the door on the driver market, right? It's worth noting that it appears Mercedes, for their part, even though this has not been officially confirmed, has no intention of pursuing Verstappen at this moment. It says perhaps he won't enjoy it much, not even behind the wheel of a Mercedes, but when he returns to the pits and sees his own name at the very top of the timesheet, the perspective, at least a little bit, changes. And it's that Verstappen needs that very rapid developments come from Red Bull, which I honestly believe is going to be complicated for them to arrive soon.
And perhaps behind the threat of him abandoning Formula One, there also lies the deep awareness and the growing frustration of having perhaps made a very wrong decision. It's quite possible that Verstappen is now playing with his own feelings, which are truly playing a very bad trick on him, because quite obviously he would much prefer not to be participating in these tests, which he currently isn't, and not be a part of Red Bull, but instead be a part of Mercedes, wouldn't he? Because Verstappen has always said, look, I want to have a championship winning car. And this is well then, family, you already know this. In summary, these Pirelli tests from which we can draw a few conclusions and where they're testing things for 2027. I've already shown you the tires, which is very important. Let's hope that super intermediate tire works well. And we'll see if the drivers can make use of it to well, the teams, especially Red Bull, are trying to close the gap a little. These tests are conducted to observe the tire's internal vibrations, its real-time deformation, and its overall hardness. Well, all sorts of technical adjustments and data collection. Taking advantage of today's rainy conditions, Pirelli is using Red Bull and Visa Cash to be able to carry this out, right? I will inform you of more details once I know the results, everyone. At least there is some real competition here in Suzuka, and we've witnessed that it's been a bit, quite disrupted by the significant lack of grip and the very complicated moment Arvid Lindblad experienced due to aquaplaning, which ultimately caused a slight delay to the start of the session. But it continues in the Pirelli 2027 tests, and Red Bull and Racing Bulls are accumulating data.